I imagine, dear listener, that as you strive to create a fulfilling and meaningful life, that it's likely that you may occasionally get in your own way. You know, those seemingly invisible chains that are holding you back from reaching your full potential in your relationships or in your career, in your personal growth, in your health and fitness, or even your overall well-being. How do I know this? Well, I do know that most of us have limiting beliefs that can create all kinds of self-inflicted obstacles. So is there anything holding you back in this new year? How can you maneuver that mind of yours and leap over any obstacles with the grace, speed, and skill of an Olympic hurdler? Well, allow me to introduce to you a couple of ways that are designed to shift your mindset. Welcome to Man Talk, a podcast of real conversations about life, your life, our life, and the emotional well-being of blokes. My name is Howard Todd-Collins. I am the Director of Men and Relationships Counselling. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year. Sit back and relax and join me for this latest episode of Man Talk. Hello, hello, hello. I hope you are well. Happy New Year to you. I hope you're beginning the new year in some kind of well-being and health. Depending where you're sitting from, I'm sitting in a very warm part of the world. This is the summer here in Melbourne. Christmas and Boxing Day were hot days out on the beach and eating all the food, but also enjoying some amazing weather. There are many people listening to me from the other side of the world where they're cold and wet and having that very traditional Christmas period of time where it feels and it is very much winter. I hope you're well and thank you for being here. Those of you who have been here before, a big thank you for supporting the Man Talk podcast over the last year or so. And if you're new, you are very welcome as we begin the new year looking at something that I think is often really, really important throughout the year, but also even as you begin to reflect on a new year ahead. This is all about limiting beliefs. These are those deeply ingrained thoughts or assumptions that may restrict you and your potential in some form in your life, either your behavior or your ability to achieve your goals and change parts of your life. These are belief systems that are based in your past experiences, but they're also somewhat shaped by your social conditioning, the way you see yourself in the world, but they're also very much impacted by your internalized belief systems, particularly if they're very negative. Internalized critical narratives, for example, will manifest themselves in self-doubt, fear, or a negative sense of yourself. Now, these limiting beliefs can include things like the thought that I'm not good enough, for example, or you may sometimes think I'll never be successful, or you may sometimes think I don't deserve to be happy. Now, these beliefs can create obvious barriers to growth and certainly impact your emotional well-being and will also impact your relationships with the people that you care about because they tend to reinforce negative patterns of thinking. Now, limiting beliefs show up in lots of different ways. So if you're a bloke in a relationship and you're struggling with a belief and you're saying to yourself, I can't express emotions, or you believe I'm not a good enough partner, or you may even believe I don't deserve to be loved, right? These are all very difficult internalized narratives and they are limiting beliefs. These kind of beliefs will lead to more emotional isolation, can increase conflict in a relationship for sure, and certainly produces a real lack of closeness and intimacy. So in terms of relationships, we're looking at feelings of disconnection, the fear of being vulnerable, the avoidance of meaningful conversations or communications. So if you're a bloke that does believe that you can't express your emotions or you see your feelings as being weak, this will stop you from that emotional intimacy and connection that you're looking for. Now, limiting beliefs will also show up in other parts of our lives. So let's just think about your career or work, for example. If you think, I'm not smart enough to get that promotion, or you think, I can't start my own business, I don't have the skills, or you believe, I'm too old to learn something new. Now, they will all prevent you from taking the risks, maybe, to pursue the opportunities or to achieve your goals. So, what are your limiting beliefs, and how do you actually deal with them? Now, overcoming these beliefs requires a shift in your mindset. So, let me introduce to you a couple of ideas. One is thought reversal, and the other one is psychological flexibility. Thought reversals are a technique. They're used to challenge conventional beliefs or assumptions that you may hold. They are designed to provoke thought, but also to encourage a shift in your perspective. They present an alternative viewpoint or a reframe of some kind of held belief that's getting in your way. Now, they're important because if they're used well, they challenge negative patterns of thinking and just encourage personal perspective or a change and a deeper understanding of yourself, right? Now, when they're used together with practical steps, they can really help to move your mindset forward. So here are a few examples for you. Now, I'm mindful that these may not be your limiting beliefs, right? You may have your own. The few that I've chosen to present to you are just ones that commonly show up in my conversations with men. They may not resonate with you, but it's likely that if you've got your own belief system that's not working for you, that thought reversals may help you to shift your perspective. So here's the first example. Now, this is a common one. It's the limiting belief that a bloke says, I have to be the strong, silent type. It's very common, and it's not unusual for that to be a strength in men, but also it can get in the way because essentially what it says, I have to be the one that fixes myself, and I do it alone, and I can deal with it on my own. So therefore, in some ways, any kind of capacity to be open or honest about your feelings or your vulnerability basically is not allowed. So you can see where that can be a problem in terms of connecting with people or even struggling with the isolation of carrying too many strong feelings that are not being processed or particularly well coped with. So the thought reversal could be something like, strength comes from being open and honest about my feelings. And a practical tip would be to start to express your feelings in a small, manageable way and begin to share them with a close friend or your partner. So you start to slowly reverse the belief system that being strong and silent is the only way to be in the world, because basically it's pretty lonely and pretty isolating. So you start to shift the idea that actually your strength comes from being open and from being honest. The second limiting belief, which is also massively common in my conversations with men in particular, is the belief that says expressing emotions makes me weak. Now, this is classic, right? It's a classic internalized belief system. It also gets in the way because when men start to feel something, they start to criticize it or push it away or judge it because essentially the belief says, this feeling makes me weak. And we know, and you and I will know, that that basically stops us in our tracks from looking after our mental health and certainly prevents real problems in listening to other people's emotions. So here's the thought reversal. Expressing emotions is a sign of courage and a sign of strength. And a practical tip would be to start to journal your own emotions. You track them by writing them down and start to reflect on the fact that you can express them that will positively impact your relationship. It will help you because your partner gets to understand more of who you are and maybe how they can help you. Here's the final one as an example of a limiting belief that shows up in my conversations all the time. And this is a really good one for both men and women in particular. I need to solve all the problems on my own. Now, it's a bit like the first one, that whole expectation of being strong and silent, but it's more than just that, because essentially what it says is bring on all the problems, I can fix them. And when you start to realize it's all weighing heavily on you, that it's creating its own pressure, and you're blocking yourself from seeking out any kind of help, that pressure becomes stress, anxiety, depression, anger, escaping, shutting down. All those impacts of that limiting belief really do get in the way. So the thought reversal could be something like seeking help and collaborating with my partner will actually get me closer to them. It strengthens the relationship. And maybe a practical tip will be, well, next time I'm coming up with a problem, I'm going to involve my partner in helping me to find the solution, because it builds teamwork, right? And it builds mutual support. Now, these are all just classic examples. You may have your own limiting belief. The idea here is to slow down and think about what those limiting beliefs are doing to you. If they're getting in the way of something, start to consider how you reframe it and start looking for some ways to move forward with some action or activity. There's so many benefits of this. Becoming more open in terms of your communication will help you to build better understanding of yourself and also of your partner. Sharing your thoughts around this could be really significant to increase that bond. And if you're looking at addressing issues together, it will help you to be more collaborative and more like a team. And particularly for men, I really want you to consider what this means. Being more open about your thoughts and about embracing your experiences and sharing them more will give you more confidence. Letting go of limiting beliefs reduces anxiety over time and stress. And it may well just overall improve your well-being, and it helps to promote self-awareness. So what I'd like you to do, this is a long segment to think about, but in your own time, have a practice. Make a list of your own assumptions or beliefs that you know are getting in your way, and see whether you can find a way to reframe them, to reverse them in some way, to more of an opportunity, and start thinking about practical actions that are associated with them. Now, this next section is a bit different. It's a different form of shifting your mindset. It is all about psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is the ability to be fully present in the moment, open to experiencing all your thoughts and emotions, even when they are difficult, and taking actions that align with your core values. Now, this definition comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is an evidence-based mindfulness behavioral approach to well-being. It all sounds good, right? I want some of that flexibility. I'm not sure about you, but it's naturally not as easy as it sounds. In my clinical experience and through the thousands of conversations I have with men, I've noticed that there are 4 common struggles that we all tend to make when it comes to psychological flexibility. So allow me to run through those 4 with you. Now, the first one, pretty common one, is that we all tend to avoid uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, right? Most of us don't want to feel the pain. So if you're the kind of man, for example, that gets overwhelmed by stress at work, but also tensions in the relationship with your partner or at home, instead of addressing your feelings or discussing the issues with your partner, you may end up distracting yourself by working longer hours or, scrolling on the phone or going out for a beer. This kind of avoidance leads to further disconnection and potentially unresolved problems in your relationship. It's part of the avoidance of uncomfortable emotions or thoughts. Really common stuff. The second common struggle is rigid thinking patterns. Now, we all have the ways that we think, and we can get caught up in certain kinds of thought processes that are very fixed. So, for example, let's say you're a bloke that feels like being emotional or vulnerable is a sign of weakness. But when your partner is expressing a need for more emotional connection, you end up dismissing their concerns. And you may end up just thinking, well, I'm supposed to be strong, right? And not talk about my feelings. Now, this rigid belief can then prevent you from opening up more to your partner and creating a deeper connection with them. The third common struggle is how we over-identify, particularly with negative thoughts. Now, we all have lots of thoughts. I think I read recently some research, I'm not sure where it was from now, but we have about 50,000 thoughts per day. Now, that's a lot of thinking, right? So just let's say you're a guy that has recurring thoughts that are quite negative. So here's an example. Let's say you're saying to yourself, I'm a failure as a partner because I can't fix the problems in my relationship. So if you believe that thought as the absolute truth, this is more likely to get you to feel the feelings of shame and self-judgment that comes with it. And if you're the kind of guy that certainly I meet many in my conversations, when they're feeling that way, most blokes tend to withdraw. So instead of challenging the thought or looking for solutions, you end up internalizing, which of course can be a real problem in terms of your confidence, but also your connection with your partner. That's just one example of over-identifying with a negative belief or a negative thought about yourself. The last one, the fourth one, is common, but maybe not as easily understood. It's where we lose sight of our core values. And we all tend to do this from time to time. So let's just say you're a bloke that values being supportive in your relationship with your partner, and you value being present. Hello. I'm sorry for interrupting this episode. I'm just dropping by, firstly, to ask you a question. What do you think the most common complaint most men and women make about their relationship? Well, it's communication problems. You thought I was going to say sex, didn't you? Well, that is actually a close second. But so many men in particular complain that they get tongue-tied and twisted when trying to communicate or open up with their partner, and often they end up shutting down or just saying the wrong things. So what is good communication in a relationship, I hear you ask? I'm so glad that you did. Well, I've actually created a free guide, Better Conversations for Blokes. It's a quick and easy guide to improving communication in your relationship. It's got heaps of tips and tricks and skills and actual phrases that you can use right now. It's made just for you. You can get the free guide in the show notes. Finish the episode and check out the show notes and find a way of improving your communication with your partner right now. But you become focused on, let's say, your work projects, your career success. And in some ways, that achievement towards success of your career ends up with a consequence of neglecting quality time with your family. So you end up missing important moments with your partner and with your kids. And this can lead to feelings of guilt and disconnection and so on. So losing sight of core values is a very common struggle that we all have. Now, some of these may resonate with you. You may have other struggles or patterns that are creating various problems in your life. So how you adopt a more psychologically flexible approach to each of these struggles and more becomes essential to overcome any kind of limiting beliefs you may have. So in the next section, I'm going to take you through, using these examples, some of the processes from acceptance and commitment therapy, but in particular, the focus on how to become more psychologically flexible. You know, avoiding uncomfortable emotions or thoughts is often called, in the jargon, experiential avoidance. We don't want to experience the feelings or the thoughts. So, in terms of becoming more psychologically flexible in response to this, there are some options that we can think about. So, instead of avoiding stress or tension, you can start to practice something towards acceptance of what you're feeling without the judgment. The fact you're feeling stress and tension that's kind of keeping you disconnected from your relationship or from your partner means you have to be able to slow down and recognize what you're feeling and diffusing any kind of judgment. So you could say to yourself, for example, I'm feeling overwhelmed and disconnected right now. There's a lot going on, and that's okay. These feelings are a part of being human. So you actually normalize what you're feeling. That's a way of accepting your experience as opposed to running away from them or ignoring them or judging them or dismissing them. And at the same time, you can start to think about how to be more present to your experience of yourself in terms of awareness. And a way of doing that is to take a pause and take a few deep breaths and focus on what you're feeling in your body as well as in your mind. And you can start thinking about how you then choose to have a conversation with your partner. So you could say something like, I've been feeling pretty stressed at work, and I realize I've been pulling away from you. I'm not as present as I would like to be. I really want to work this with you or work on this with you. So this approach will allow you to face what you're feeling, take some meaningful action instead of avoiding the whole experience altogether. So they work in tandem. The idea of slowing down, recognizing your emotion, no judgment, reframe it, normalize it, be more present, and then lean into the value of being more connected and have a conversation with your partner. Now, another example of a psychologically flexible approach to the second struggle that we spoke about was the rigid thinking patterns, right? Now, you can use a skill that's called diffusion or cognitive diffusion. It's actually a way of stepping back from some of those limiting or rigid beliefs you have. Now, one of them we mentioned earlier was that men should not show vulnerability, right? That kind of idea that showing emotions is weak. So if you get stuck in this in your head, what you can start thinking about doing is, instead of treating the thought as a fact, you can also reframe it. So you could say to yourself, this is in relationship to your rigid belief about showing vulnerability as weak. You could say, this is just a thought that I've learnt over time. It stops working for me and doesn't have to define who I am. And you can then start to think about what your values are in relationship to connecting with your partner. So you may start thinking a bit more about the value of connection. You could say to yourself, well, I value being a supportive and an emotionally available partner. Sharing my feelings does not make me weak. What it does do, it helps me to build the trust and connection with the person I love. So this shifting allows you to challenge the thought pattern, but also act in alignment with your values of being supportive and being emotionally available. So hopefully you can see how this kind of works. It's a bit paradoxical, really. You have to be able to face up to what you're thinking and feeling that is getting in the way, and look at reframing it as a way of shifting it forward, as opposed to judging it or criticizing it or ignoring it. Now, there are a couple more of these common struggles that I mentioned that I want to share with you as a way of trying to shift the belief system that you may get caught up with. And that's coming up next. Now, do you ever find yourself over-identifying with certain kind of thoughts? Now, this particular struggle is really focusing on negative thoughts about yourself or self-critical thoughts. Now, I used the example earlier of a particular critical thought, right? I'm a failure as a partner. Now, if you find yourself getting locked into something like this, and it may not be exactly the same, but there'll be some equivalent that you'll know of yourself where you get caught up in a particular critical negative self-talk. So let's use this as an example. Let's say you are getting caught up in, I'm a failure as a partner. Now, practicing the skill of diffusion is really about learning to recognize that it's just a thought. It's not the truth, right? So your thoughts are not the truths. You don't have to buy into all your thoughts as absolute truths, right? But we do it. We do it all the time. The idea is to step away from the thought and notice it, right? So you could say to yourself in this example, you could actually say to yourself, I'm noticing that I have the thought that I'm a failure. You could say to yourself, I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. Now that's you beginning to observe your thought because you're noticing it. You're not buying into it. By noticing, you're not buying in. You're just noticing and observing the thought you have. And you can even add to this narrative. You could say to yourself, I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a failure, and this thought does not have to define who I am. I'm just aware that my mind is going through a tough situation. I'm trying to make sense of it the best way I can. Now, that kind of approach to observing your thoughts takes a lot of practice. So using yourself as a kind of context in a way is that you can then remind yourself that you are more than just your thoughts. In fact, you are more than just your feelings, right? You can even just add to this reflection when you feel like you're a failure. You can even say to yourself, yes, I've made mistakes, but I'm also somebody who cares deeply about my relationship with my partner, and I'm willing to grow. Now, that's a much more accepting approach, but you have to be able to sit back and take the power away from some of your thoughts. Learning to observe takes the power away from your thoughts because you're not buying into them quite as much. It gets you to detach from your negative thoughts and at the same time focus on taking constructive steps towards moving towards the change you're looking for. The final struggle, which is a bit more complex in a way, is all about values. People have different views of what values actually means. But in terms of the example that I gave earlier, it was about a bloke feeling disconnected from his family due to the work pressures, right? So you may be in this position at times in your own life where you are feeling disconnected from the family because you're so busy at work, and yet the value you have is really important. This value of being connected. And you may be asking yourself the question, and this may be really useful to think about, what kind of partner or father do I want to be? As you realize that those values of being present and supportive are moving further and further away from you, you can slow down and reflect on the value by checking in with yourself and focusing on a particular committed action to set some smaller, more meaningful goals to realign yourself. For example, so if you are very busy at work and you're aware that you've had long days and you've come home late for dinner or you've missed the kids' bedtime or whatever, then you can then decide, maybe I'll dedicate some time through the evening when I get home to be more present, less distracted, spend time with the kids if you can. And you can even say to them, I want to show up more because you are my priority. So taking intentional steps are a way of rebuilding that connection and that value that are really important to you. Just because you're moving away from your values does not mean that you can that you can't bring yourself back. Because you can, but you have to be able to take a flexible approach to this. Catching yourself is one thing. Recognizing that you want to shift your expectations of yourself is another thing, and taking action towards it is really important. Now, all of these struggles and mistakes are really normal and really common. They can all be addressed by these skills of being more mindful, more self-compassionate, and really honing in on what matters to you. Values-based actions are all about what matters. They are the key components to becoming more psychologically flexible. Now, I realize that we have covered a lot in this episode, and it may take you some time to think about some of these skills and practices. There is some information in the show notes about where you can get more information about acceptance and commitment therapy in particular. But we have covered a lot, thought reversals and those skills of psychological flexibility take time to practice. They are designed to get you to reflect on your own thought processes and your own beliefs, and at the same time to clarify what really matters in your life. I reckon at the beginning of a new year is a good time to be checking in with yourself, but also find moments in your life during the year to keep on self-reflecting. We all get in our own way, right? This is really normal and really common. My hope for you is that you can see that by practicing, these kinds of self-talk and helping you to embrace your experiences completely and fully, and that all the feelings that come with them are natural and meaningful as opposed to something to suppress or avoid completely. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know on Instagram at Man Talk with Howard. If this episode sparks more of your interest, check the show notes for some of the online programs that I'm now developing that can help you make a sense of yourself, but also your relationship. If you're in Australia and you want to keep talking about some of these issues that are coming up through the podcast, then there's a booking button where you can do some work with me. We can consult face-to-face or online. A big thank you for listening. I hope this is a good new year for you. If you like what you hear, please tell your mates and give me a review wherever you find the podcast. I look forward to talking with you again in the next episode of Man Talk.